Hey, this is Pastor Bunjee Garrett, and I want to take this opportunity to present you with another word of encouragement. Now, it was just last night when Biden addressed the nation as he encouraged every American to realize that it's time to make a choice. We can either move forward into the future or we can move backwards as we obsess about the past. He also encouraged us to become a nation of hope and unity and optimism, rather than a nation of fear, division, and darkness. So with this as the goal, I just want to take some time to consider the future that Biden is leading us towards. And listen, as we consider this future, it'll help you to know that for the first time ever in the history of our nation, the median rent has topped $2,000 a month. And listen, this increase shows no sign of stopping. According to the figures that come from the Census Bureau, the rising cost of rent has resulted in a total of 8.5 million people who are currently behind on paying their rent. And listen, almost 4 million of those renters say that they're about to be evicted from their homes in the next 2 months. That's right, nearly 4 million renters are about to be homeless within the next 2 months. Not only that, but the eviction numbers from August are just as alarming. For example, the evictions that just occurred in Tampa there in August, that they were 52% above average. And the number of evictions in Houston and Minneapolis, that they were both at least 90% above average in August. Is this the future that Biden is endorsing? Well, it's also interesting to note that more and more Americans have been forced to purchase their groceries with the buy now, pay later loan options like Zip, which services major retailers like Costco, DoorDash, and Safeway. According to the data from Zip, their business is actually up 95% this year for people just wanting to buy groceries. That's right. The number of Americans who are taking out loans just to buy groceries now has doubled this year. And with that, I have to ask, is this the future that Biden is endorsing? Oh, and let's not forget about the continual increase of violent crimes happening in almost every major city. According to the crime data from Baltimore, Chicago, Los Angeles, New York City, Philadelphia, Seattle, and Washington, D.C., violent crimes have increased this year anywhere from 5% all the way up to 40% when compared to the same time frame in 2021. This includes increasing reports of rape, sexual assault, robbery, assault, and murder. And listen, rather than locking up these violent criminals with stricter sentences, progressive judges simply send them back into the streets where they commit more crime. And meanwhile, the Biden administration continues to push for more restrictive gun laws, which will only further embolden the criminals who don't obey gun laws. Is this the future that Biden is endorsing? At the same time, nearly 5 million immigrants have illegally crossed our southern border since Biden was installed. And while I realize that the majority of these people are simply looking for a better way of life here in America, it's also important to realize that the cartels there in Mexico have been using this flood of immigrants as a distraction that allows them to engage in all sorts of criminal activities, including child trafficking and drug smuggling. As a matter of fact, the director of the Latin American branch of the Coalition Against Trafficking International, this person has informed us that at least 60% of Latin American children smuggled across the U.S. border have been caught up by the cartels and are currently being abused in child pornography or for drug trafficking. And what this means then is that the open border policies of Biden has caused an increasing amount of child trafficking here in America. Stephen Miller summed it up by saying this, and I quote, "Joe Biden's decision to resettle all unaccompanied illegal minors from beyond Mexico in the United States and to place them with unvetted adult sponsors makes him and his party in Congress responsible for the largest child smuggling epidemic in human history." He continues in this way: "It has enriched virtually every major child smuggler in the hemisphere and far beyond. It has filled the ranks of MS-13. It has created a monstrous industry of vast global reach, and it has made America's border into the world's epicenter of labor trafficking, sex trafficking, and modern modern day slavery. Wow, that is a horrific reality. And not only this, but listen, Biden's open border policies has also allowed the cartels to fill our country with all sorts of drugs, including the deadly fentanyl. As a result, there's been a dramatic rise in overdose deaths all across our country, largely because of fentanyl. And it's sad to say that the drug smugglers, they're beginning to target our children. As a matter of fact, there's a new form of fentanyl, which is called rainbow fentanyl, which actually resembles thick pieces of brightly colored sidewalk chalk. Other versions are colorful pills that resemble candy. And as we consider the way that drug smugglers appear to be targeting our children with these products, we must not forget that this has been made possible by the open border policies of Biden. Is this the future that Biden is endorsing? Speaking of targeting our kids, the California Senate just passed Assembly Bill 2223 in a 30-9 vote. And just to be clear, once Gavin Newsom signs this into law, he will allow anyone to commit abortions by any means and throughout all 9 months of pregnancy. And what's even worse than that is that this law will also penalize any state authority that investigates the death of an infant. In this way, California has effectively legalized infanticide. Is this the future that Biden is endorsing? Sadly, it is. And what this means is that Biden wants every American to embrace the progressive policies that are clearly destroying the very fabric of our country. And while it's true that he calls every American to unite behind the single purpose of defending our democracy, it's also true that the majority of Americans disapprove of Biden's job performance, and yet he's ignoring this Democratic position. According to a recent Gallup poll, it was from July, nearly 60% of Americans disapprove of Biden's job performance. And not only that, but listen, even a CNN poll from July also revealed that 75% of Democratic and Democratic-leaning voters want the party to nominate someone other than Biden in the 2024 election. And so while Biden spent his time last night demonizing the MAGA extremists who are destroying democracy, he simultaneously fails to acknowledge the fact that the majority of Americans can't wait for him to be replaced democratically. That being the case, I just want to take a moment to consider a comment that the White House press secretary presented just yesterday. Here's what Karine Jean-Pierre said as she warned us about extremist thinking. And I quote her here: "When you are not with where the majority of Americans are, then you know that is extreme." That is an extreme way of thinking. Okay, so listen, if we just ignore the fact that this is a fallacious appeal to popular opinion, I should take a moment just to remind you here that nearly 60% of Americans disapprove of Biden's job performance. That's right. The majority of Americans disapprove of Biden's job performance. And so, according to the argument of Biden's White House press secretary, the Americans who are right now approving of Biden's job performance must be guilty of extreme thinking because they're not with the majority. Without debate, Biden's progressive policies are literally destroying our nation. And while Biden has assured us that his plan will result in hope and unity and optimism, the reality is that he has us on a path that's leading us to fear, division, and darkness. And with that being the case, I encourage you to embrace the encouragement that the Lord Jesus presented in Jeremiah chapter 6. It's there where the Lord declares this. He says, "Stand in the ways and see, and ask for the old paths where the good way is, and walk in it. Then you will find rest for your souls." Christian, listen, the peace that we all desire, it's not going to be found on the path of progressive policies, which promise utopia and deliver a horrific nightmare. Listen, it's the old path that guides us back to God. This is the path that will exalt a nation. And this is precisely the point that the psalmist was making in the 33rd Psalm, where he declared, "Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord." Christian, listen, if we truly want to enjoy the blessings of the Lord here in America, then we should do everything within our power to lead the people within our sphere of influence back to the Lord Jesus Christ. And with this as the goal, let's get out there and preach the gospel of grace as we lead people to the Lord Jesus Christ. And in this way, we're helping to lead our nation back to the right path where the blessings of God can be experienced. And this is the way that we fight the good fight of faith and all for the glory of God.